Yeah? Are we ready?
Ready.
Good evening. Welcome. We're going to talk tonight about building resilience and coping in the COVID world. We're really so grateful for you to join us and have us here. We have a special guest that Justin will introduce, and her name is Allison. She will be giving us a presentation, and then kind of the format that we have is we'll end up talking afterwards. We would love for you to put questions, comments in the Q&A box, and or to give us a call. We want to hear from you. We want to hear how you're doing. We want to hear any questions that you might have having to do with how you're coping in this COVID world. Justin?
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it. So yeah, we're excited to have a guest speaker with us again this week. We have Allison King. Allison is a licensed clinical social worker out of LA County. In addition to that, though, she is with HealthNet and Managed Health Network, has her own private practice, and most, I think, interestingly, is a yoga instructor and a mindfulness coach. So we're happy to have her here today for a presentation. I did want to go around the screen as well, and Robin Roberts introduced herself from Behavioral Health. We also have Stephanie Valdez from Mono County Behavioral Health. We have Stacy Corliss, chair of the Board of Supervisors for Mono County. We have Sheriff Ingrid Braun joining us again. And then we have Olivia, who's hiding there. She's with Mono County as well and helping us out on the back end a little bit. So thank you all for joining us again. And we'll jump right into Allison's presentation. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me a little bit as I pull up her presentation.
As Justin's pulling it up, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you all about something that I am very passionate about. So I have actually, at the beginning of this COVID period, which is now not a period but ongoing, excuse the animals in the background, I felt it was really important to start conversations about self-care, something called whole person self-care, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is the crux of what I'm going to be talking about, resilience, how that plays into this. And I actually am a firm believer in inspirational quotes. So I thought today, like what they just kind of come to me, like I run across them or they come to me. And today I came across one and I thought, this one seems pretty fitting. It's, you don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only option you have. You don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only option you have. Actually, it's Bob Marley, which I was surprised because I had never heard that before. I really want to acknowledge that everyone is going through something individually. Everything's going through individual stuff. Everyone's going through communal stuff, universal stuff that is just impacting us to the core on a daily basis. And living in these times, you know, going from what seems to be an acute situation to a more chronic situation, it's taking constant recalibration. So how do we do that? And what do we need to do to be strong and survive in this COVID world? So self-care is a concept I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And it's everywhere you look now, which thank goodness, because it's so hugely important. So it's really being broadcast and everywhere now about what is it and how important it is. And my hope is that after this presentation, you'll have a more comprehensive perspective of self-care and why it's so important, and some ideas for yourself about how to incorporate it into your life in a different kind of a way. And then also when you might need help, because self-care doesn't always cut it. Try to navigate my own thing here. Okay, next slide, please. So selflessness and flexibility, you know, whether we're caring for somebody else right now, protecting our family, our community, doing our jobs, questioning our beliefs, which happens a lot during times like this, or protesting in the streets, we're all learning. We're all in a learning mode of what it means to be selfless and flexible, because it's really required of all of us as human beings in this moment in time. Go with it. Like, what's happening today? What's the new news? What's of immediate needs immediate attention, and what's happening. So what's really needed is not only this high level of selflessness and flexibility, but selflessness, flexibility, strength, and balance. Adding strength and balance to this equation really adds an additional protective layer to our health and well-being. And it can help keep us from going over the edge. So how do we do this? That's the question. How do we do this? How do we develop this combination of, things? And that's really through resilience and developing resilience. Next slide, please. Okay, so you have to dedicate time and energy into developing it, and all kinds of curveballs. We need to be ready and able to use those resilience muscles. So I like to bus or a subway when you can't have a seat and you have to stand kind of in the middle. You have to really develop it. You have to use your core muscles. You have to use your legs, keep your knees bent, because if you hit a bump or there's a sudden stop, you're going to be thrown. Right? You might fall over. So I kind of think of resilience in that way. Like, it's kind of like those core muscles inside of our body where it helps to keep us steady and stable, and we can always count on it to hold us up. So what resilience is, like I said before, well, first of all, we've all gone through things in our lives. We all have our own life's histories that are impacting who we are, how we see things, how we operate, our perspective, our thoughts, feelings, behaviors. And now there is something additional and something specific, which we're all experiencing communally. It's shared by all of us. Resilience is, it's basically a combination of behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed. And it's the idea of maintaining flexibility and balance in life as you deal with stressful circumstances and traumatic life events. What it's not, which is the good news, is a characteristic or a personality trait necessarily. So what that means is anybody can develop it, anybody can cultivate it and build it. So it's not necessarily an innate. Although some people do have a sort of hardwiring for a higher level of resiliency, it is something that everybody can, even without that kind of like hardwiring base that some people seem to have in the world. It's something we can all develop. So what types of behaviors, thoughts, and actions do we need to build? Do we need to engage in to build these, what I call resilience muscles? And that's where this idea of whole person self-care comes in. Next slide, please. So self-care, I mean, theoretically, it's a really simple concept, but it's really something we often overlook until we're entirely depleted, until we just are flat out can't do much more. And then we think, oh my God, you're almost over the edge at that point. And when people ask, oh, well, what do you do for self-care? A lot of us say things like, oh, well, I used to get a massage pre-COVID, right? I used to get a massage, or I take a bath, or I go on vacation. That all really helps. And these are all amazing self-care strategies for sure. But self-care really has to be deliberate. It has to be comprehensive, balanced, and most importantly, practiced on a daily basis, especially right now. So why do it? I was talking about before where people logged on, I was talking about stress reduction. There's a lot of research studies out there that talk about different self-care practices, which I'll get into in a minute, and how the evidence is showing, research is showing that it reduces cortisol levels, it reduces stress, which is the stress hormone. So it reduces stress, it reduces anxiety and depression. It's really required to avoid burnout and compassion fatigue. And even if you aren't a first responder or aren't in a helping profession, I think we all sort of can get this compassion fatigue because of the news feed. I mean, the media, all the feed that we're getting constantly about everything that's going on and people's lives and, you know, everything that's at stake and everything that's going on. So we can actually, even if we're not in that line of work, can suffer from this fatigue, emotional, psychological, physical fatigue from having compassion around and being exposed to all of these really horrible things that are happening. Self-care is really the key to building resilience, especially right now. Next slide, please. A little mouse problem here with my phone stuff. Okay. So I feel like there's a term called whole person self-care. So it's a little bit more comprehensive than self-care itself. It is a really more fit. So what it is it's basically, or spheres. And there's a lot of different ways of slicing and dicing this concept of whole person self-care or whole person care. And if you look it up on the internet, you'll see tons of different images and, you know, ways, diagrams about how to define this. For me, this is the most streamlined and simple way to describe it. The idea is to develop practices to attend to each one of these spheres of ourselves, of our life, to what we're looking for in life and to build that resilience. So I'm going to touch on, you want to just talk about the spiritual really quickly. Obviously, a true discussion about spirituality is outside of this presentation, but I want to make a plug for it for people because religion and spirituality are not necessarily one and the same. If you have a spiritual practice and or religious practice, it's really important to attend to that part of ourselves right now. If you don't, it would be a great time to think about what's.
Oh, I think you froze up.
I'd make a joke here, but I'm not going to.
Spirituality from religion, which is an ongoing chronic crisis. You know, these big kind of existential, it's our purpose in life. This might mean for people. Okay, next slide. Okay, so first and foremost, we have to have a daily life routine. It's our foundation because we need a daily rhythm. We need something to help ground us, like a routine. A daily routine helps give us a sense of normalcy, predictability, something we don't have right now. But in our own lives, we can try to create that as much as possible. And self-care, basically, the idea is to build this into your daily routine. Now, I want to stop for a second because I want to talk about something someone said during a presentation I gave a couple months back. They said, God, this seems overwhelming. This seems like a lot. What if all you can do is nothing sometimes? Excellent point. We all feel, it's totally normal, right? We all feel like sometimes just, oh God, all we can really do is, you know, sit in front of the TV and binge watch Netflix, right? So we really need to listen to ourselves. I think that's about, if that's what we need, because sometimes doing nothing at all is self-care. And actually that idea of lying on the couch and watching Netflix, it actually hits on a couple of these spheres that I'm going to talk about, which is biological because that's rest, and psychological because it's entertainment, right? And it's kind of something mindless that you can just kind of relax into, depending on what you're watching, I guess. And if you do binge watching, which I have some friends who do this in tandem with a friend, like for the physical distancing piece, you can do FaceTime or Skype or whatnot with a friend and binge watch at the same time. You're actually adding in a social sphere to that too. But you know, it's about balance, right? So if we find ourselves unable to activate ourselves at all, that's when we know something is wrong. And I'll talk about that as well, but that, you know, learning how to pay attention to that. So I just want to touch on a couple of these really quickly, because I think it's important to try to reframe them into what we can do into a daily routine. So the biological domain of self-care. So the classic ideas and concept behind this is like getting your regular medical care, having a healthy diet, exercising, getting enough rest and sleep. We all want to do this. This is important, hugely important. But that's when it's like, oh God, I'm too overwhelmed to exercise, and I don't have enough time. I've got kids, I've got work, I've got so much stuff going on. It's crazy. I don't have time to take care of myself in that way. But if you reframe it and you look at it differently, you can, and kind of broaden the lens about what it means. There are some doable practices. So these are some examples, like taking your multivitamins, for example. That's self-care. You're taking care of yourself biologically. Eating an apple instead of a donut today, another way of taking care of yourself in your biological domain. For exercise, setting a timer. I know people who do this, to set a timer when they're working, and they do 25 squats and they do several push-ups, you know, and that's their like getting themselves charged. That's attending to your biological domain. Turning your phone or all your media off 15 minutes earlier than you usually do. I always recommend an hour before bedtime and an hour before self-care. You're saying, okay, maybe this is something, you know, I shouldn't be looking at stuff, scrolling, looking at social media and news and whatnot before I go to bed. So, and making your bedtime a really important, kind of sacred, important time. The other one I'm going to hit on real quick is mindfulness. It's like the psychological sphere. So mindfulness practices, meditation practices, time in nature, which I hear a lot of people are coming out and visiting your communities and not being respectful and not approaching it like leave no trace, and kind of using it as their playground in a way, which is really unfortunate. Hobbies, pets, having positive self-affirmations, journaling. These are all the kinds of things that can help us, you know, in this psychological domain. So how do you build this into a daily? Here's some quick life hacks. Use a meditation app, and I have some resources for this. 5 to 10 minutes a day, I'm telling you, it can make the world of difference, and it's not a huge time dedication. Or just closing your eyes and taking 5 deep, conscious breaths. Again, attending to your psychological sphere. Going outside, looking at the sun, you know, spending a few hours outdoors. Spending time with your pet. I know Sheriff Braun, I saw her petting her dog earlier. I mean, that's great. We need to have, I cleared all my pets out. I have a bird cage behind me, you don't know if you can see it, but I cleared all my pets out so they wouldn't disturb this. But they're lifesavers for me. I can turn around and engage with them, and it's very uplifting. Inspirational quotes, like I said one at the beginning of this of the presentation. I have several posted on my screens here. Another one that I have here, I'm just moving around so I can see it, is happiness is my superpower. That's the one that's working for me this week, right? So just having things like that'll help cultivate that psychological sphere. So for the sake of time, I know I always run over because I talk a lot. So I'm going to keep going, but I'm hoping you guys get the idea of this. You know, the social and spiritual, I'm not going to go into in depth right now, but you can have a look at this. But the thing is that these practices some take cultivating, for sure, Some are easily done and are just natural. And I think we all have that, are guilty of saying, I don't have the time, but it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time and resources, whether it's time or money, to invest. And I really think if you redefine or reframe what it is, it can be doable. Okay, self-care safety plan. So back to the doing nothing example of laying down and watching Netflix. Knowing when we've reached that tipping point is really important. And having a self-care safety plan is a really good idea. So what I call it a self-care safety plan because I think of it like emergency preparedness. Like a fire escape route map that you might have in an office building, you know, they've got the little, tells you where to go, or an earthquake kit you might have at home. So the idea behind this is, what do you do? You know, basically, what do you do if you find yourself, any of these kind of symptoms or signs are coming up for you? Like I'll say with the biological, if for more than 2 weeks, if there's a significant change in your sleeping or eating patterns, difficulty concentrating, a lot of headaches, stomach aches, so things happening in your body are coming up, start by talking to your doctor. That's the first step. That's safety plan number 1, start by your doctor. And then that may lead to other kinds of interventions. Psychological, if you have any of the above things, because that's kind of obviously another piece of this. Or if you find yourself using alcohol too much, or smoking, or using tobacco or other drugs, or finding yourself excessively worrying or being really sad, unable to really go on with your days, being really irritable and on edge, avoiding activities. So that's when you might want to reach out for behavioral health support. And I don't know everything that's in your community besides Mono County Behavioral Health. I'm sure there are other places, I'm assuming, too, for people to access care, right, is by contacting the community mental health to get some support and assistance and see what to do next. I want to just really quickly talk about a couple symptoms or signs in kids. These are all adults. These are all based on adult symptoms or signs. Some of them can happen in kids and teens as well, but some additional things are like if your kid starts, if you have a young child and they start regressing, like bedwetting or toileting accidents, that might be a sign that something's really going on with them. Really crying a lot or being really clingy, acting out, or them being really irritable, avoiding school, having really poor school performance. I know this whole school, I don't know how it is in your county, but it's really difficult here. Some kids are really taking to the online schooling, some it's not working at all, and they're falling behind. Difficulty paying attention or concentrating, also some psychosomatic stuff in the body, like phantom kind of headaches or pain. So these are things to watch out in your kids. Okay, next slide, please. So I just threw this in here. It's a self-care check-in. This is, there's all kinds of different things that on the internet, of course, about these kind of evaluations or self-assessments. I just put this on here for people to think about. This particular one, the domains are obviously more expansive than the biopsychosocial spiritual that I had presented. But it's the same kind of concept, and I think it gets you thinking in the right direction. And the idea is just to look at them and see, like, if you rate yourself as a 3 or less than a 3 on any of these, it's something maybe you want to start thinking about and cultivating, and how can you pay attention to that to really start creating that balance. Okay, next slide. So I have this whole section. I don't know how available this PowerPoint is going to be to people after this presentation. So I don't know how you all push this out to the community, but I just wanted to go through a couple things real quick.
We can make it available through a link. We'll put this video up, and then we can PowerPoint to the link.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so I'm assuming I'm probably over my time, right?
Sure, if you want to wrap up, and then we can go to questions if we have any, that'd be great.
Cool, I'm gonna wrap it up right now. Okay. So, so these next couple of slides are resources, both that anyone can access. Now, as Justin said, I work for HealthNet, so this is something that we have at HealthNet, but it's also available to the community. And I love this tool, it's beautiful. And they're constantly adding new topics. Like they obviously added COVID information and modules and facing racism and discrimination. They have added, they're constantly building upon it. So these are some of the topics that they have on here regularly. Here's the web address. And there's access code. If you're a HealthNet member, you can use HealthNet. Well, if you're a community member, you can just use HealthNet Community, and you can get in. So you don't have to be a HealthNet member to use it. Okay, next slide. So speaking of adding modules, when I went back on recently to update my presentation, I saw, wow, they have this new one about resilience in a time of crisis. So as you can see, these are all on the right here. These are all the modules that are under this topic of coping during COVID-19. There's all these modules on the right. And it's pretty, they have a lot of different modules on COVID-19, but I put specifically up here the coping, because that's the topic for today. But I highly recommend you perusing this tool, this web-based tool, because the models are actually really great. And they don't take a lot of time to go through. Okay, next slide. You know, this is, I don't know if you guys know about mindfulness, but it's basically an age-old Buddhist practice with basically the religious aspects taken out of it. And there's tons of research about its effectiveness. I like this quote by John Kabat-Zinn: mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So I think that, you know, it's basically a psychological state of awareness, and meditation is just one of the many ways to tap into it. You know, some of the stress, emotional reactivity, improved self-reflection, insight, memory, focus, all this mental flexibility. It's like, what doesn't it do? It does so many things for us. Relationship satisfaction, improves your immune functioning. I mean, there's so many things that this does. So these are just some apps. Actually, my favorite, to be honest with you, is Insight Timer, but all of these are good. And I recommend, you know, downloading them, and I just played with them to see which one works for me. So this is just a grab bag of some good apps to use for mindfulness. A good mindfulness link about different resources is mindful.org. And then there's some terrific classes you can do online. There's this one from Yale, which is, I have not taken this one, but it's the Science of Wellbeing, and it's free. And then there's the Mindful Awareness Practice Research Center through UCLA. They have these classes, these mindful awareness practice classes. I don't know if they're charging that during COVID or not, but those are really terrific as well. Okay, so we don't have to go through the rest, but if you just want to flip through, I've added at the back here. If you just want to flip through them pretty quickly, you will have access to them. So there's just some stress release playbooks that were put out by the Surgeon General's office. I have articles about how to support your children and teens. And then the last couple of slides are resources and hotlines. And yeah, so that's it. And then the very last slide, you don't need to, well, you see me, but that was my home office earlier in the, earlier couple months ago when I was doing these without the video feed. So thank you for allowing me to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thank you so much. I've been taking notes. Anybody want to start? Do we have any questions to start with, Justin?
We don't have any questions. I do want to remind those listening that they can utilize the Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. There's also the ability to submit an anonymous question as well. So please, anything you'd like to discuss, any tips or tricks that you might want to share, or if you have any questions, please put them in there.
Fabulous. Any of you want to start with your reactions or thoughts or?
This is Stacy. Elected officials can't help but fill any possible second of silence with a comment. But I just want to acknowledge that, particularly for us in Mammoth and Mono County, this week so far, it's really only Wednesday. It's been very stressful, and I had 3 different people tell me yesterday was their very worst day in a really long time because of our situation here. It's very scary. It's very busy. so I think so Allison, thank you for, we have to just constantly remind ourselves that there are tools here. We got to reach in our toolbox, pull out a tool for even just 1 second. And I was in an almost 8-hour meeting yesterday, and I did that during the break. I stepped out onto my balcony, onto my deck, and just looked at the sun, just stood in the sunshine, felt the wind on my face, thought of one thing for which I was really grateful, and, you know, made sure I got a big glass of water, got some snacks, got some healthy snacks. Although I have to admit, I'm really craving a donut when I saw the we have a really good donut shop up in Bridgeport, which is our county seat. And normally in summer, when we have our meeting, our supervisors meetings in Bridgeport, I go to a donut shop, and I'm really bummed that I haven't to go to the donut shop. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And I just want to thank everybody, you know, right now, like today, this week is really, really hard. And if we need to talk about that, we talk about the, you know, technical stuff at tomorrow night's meeting. This is really about how we're feeling and how we're dealing with it.
Now you guys just made me hungry with the donut talk, but one of the things that I really appreciated from the presentation was just a reminder of simple things, right? Because you touched on you know, and I'm great at this. I don't have time. I have the kids. I gotta clean. I gotta cook, right? But simple little things that we can do for self-care, such as, you know, push-ups, you know, just taking a deep breath. I really appreciated that, those small reminders, because I think sometimes we just get so overwhelmed with like, oh, if only I could go on vacation, but it's a lot simpler than going on vacation.
Mm-hmm. One of my self-care tricks, and this won't work for everybody, is I like to bake. And I was texting with Robin and Stacy, I like to bake donuts now. That's my new thing. I bought donut pans. Oh. And so
there's a donut pan?
There's a theme. Yes.
I didn't even know there was a donut pan.
There is a donut pan, and there's stereotypes, and stereotypes can usually be bad, but some stereotypes are super accurate. So cups and donuts, totally accurate. We love donuts. So I'm gonna bake donuts for Stacy and Robin, because they both expressed an interest in donuts. So Allison, you have the reverse psychological effect on them by talking about eating.
Hey, but you know what?
Whatever it takes.
It's all about moderation. That's self-care too. It's just, if you're like gaining the COVID-19 and getting 15 pounds and you're not feeling good, then you gotta make a change.
Yeah. But I love to bake. I love the process of it. I love, I'm a rule follower mostly. So I like the science of it and the end product and how it all turns out. So that's one of my stress reliefs. And people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you baked. I love to bake. Makes me happy.
So
and then I like to give it away.
We have a couple questions, and while they do relate to, I want to remind the audience that we will have a community conversation, as Supervisor Corliss mentioned, tomorrow evening at 5:30 in English and 6:30 in Spanish, to really address kind of the nuts and bolts of everything that's going on in town. And I know there's a question about short-term rentals and camping, and those will all be addressed tomorrow night. But we do have one question that's a little bit of a hybrid, and that is someone who's interested in visiting from out of town and really recognizing what's going on locally, and how can they be respectful of what's going on locally, and what do they expect as a visitor in Mammoth Lakes right now. And I don't know if Supervisor Corliss, this is sort of your baby. I don't know if you want to take this.
Sure, and Ken, thank you for asking this question. I think that's it's nice to see that self-awareness. You know, Mammoth, we welcome visitors. We're a tourism and recreation town, and our hotels and campgrounds and trails and recreation facilities are open. But it's also at the same time really scary for those of us who live here because of COVID and because it's very busy. So I would say, yes, you'll be welcome here, but please remember that just because we're all in the mountains, that COVID hasn't gone away, that all the same rules apply. That if you're on a trail, please make sure you have a face covering, even just a bandana around your neck, and put it on when you pass somebody else on the trail. probably all the same things you're doing at home. I think that would go a long way. Just realizing that all the same rules apply, and being mindful to leave no trace when you're out recreating. You know, picking up trash and pet waste, and you know, and hopefully we'll smile at you through our masks, and you'll smile back at us.
Yeah, and if you don't want to come to Mammoth, there's further up north, I believe they're a little less impacted, and it might be easier to get away from people if that's what you're looking for, to come up.
Yeah, we hear that Bridgeport, the Bridgeport Valley area, Twin Lakes, there's a lot of great places to stay, camp, hike. That could be a good option to, you know, avoid the crowds in Mammoth.
And one thing I would ask is, when people come here as families, they want to do things as groups, and we get that. Can you please just not shop as a group? You can just send one person into the store. You don't have to shop in the family pod. It makes it hard to navigate. And it's not that we don't like you, it's that we don't know you. And so it makes us wary of strangers walking in pods and not wearing masks. And so wear the face covering and send one person into the store. That would be great.
Great. Thank you both. So another question, this one.
Can I just say something about that?
Please.
Can I say something real quick? I just want to acknowledge how difficult that must be for you as a community, because I just came from a trip, Pacific Northwest. I went on a road trip. And when I would go to towns or areas where people weren't wearing masks, and I got really anxious. So I can only imagine, as a community, when you have people coming in and people aren't being respectful in that way, how anxiety producing that must be. So I'm really sorry that that's happening, especially because a lot of people probably are coming from my county, from LA County. So I'm sorry.
Right. I have one punctuation to that, and that is that our service workers are being very impacted all throughout the county. So whether they work in restaurants or your grocery store, or you go to the post office, your campground hosts, gas station attendants, all those people are being incredibly impacted by the public. So be kind. I'm finding that just, you know, people, I think this is happening a little bit less, but people will bring their angst to the person that they're working with and say, you know, I don't like masks, or I wish people wore more masks, whatever. They don't need that conversation because they're having it all day. What they need is a thank you. Tip your service workers if it's a tippable place higher than you might normally. Like, really understand that we are asking people to go above and beyond and be in situations where they're having to deal with the public in a very large way. And if we can be kind and thoughtful and, you know, just ask how their day is or say thank you, that would go a long way. Now we have more questions.
We do. Alicia, did you want to jump in on that? I saw your hand raised.
Alicia.
Hi, guys. I am so happy to hear from someone like Ken. Ken, would you do some visitor training for us? It's such a thoughtful and considerate question. And I think, as I had my hand raised to sort of jump in, but I think everything's been said. If you want any help planning your trip, please call us at Mono County Tourism. And I think actually Robin even put the monocounty.org website there for tourism planning. So thanks again for your considerate question. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. So this is another question, and this, I think a lot of us might be feeling this way. This is for Allison. Do you have any suggestions for ways to deal with the cumulative stress? I find I have several good days and then fall into the pit. And even though I know the things I should be doing, but I cannot get motivated, or it takes a couple days to get back on track.
Yeah.
Donut.
So stress. So that's called chronic. It almost sounds like to a toxic. There's cumulative, and then there's toxic stress, right? So when you get into this place of moving over where it feels toxic to our mind, body, and our spirit, that it might not be a bad idea to reach out for a little bit of help to help get you on track. I'm a firm believer in mindfulness practice, and even whether it's at nighttime before you go to bed or in the morning when you first wake up, using one of those that I were on that on the PowerPoint might be really helpful, because sometimes the safest place and the most comfortable place, depending on you and your life history, is going inside. Is just kind of like regrouping inside yourself. But I completely understand. Sometimes it's hard to just put one foot in front of the other, and it's really kind of like that motto, one day at a time. Just tackling each day, just look at things day to day, one foot in front of the other. What can I do today to make a step towards activating myself a little bit? So there's not, I wish there was one like thing that I could say like, oh, there's this thing that'll just, you can do and it'll take care of all of it. But really it's a piecemeal process of trying to look at those different spheres and seeing what makes sense and what would be helpful for you. Getting outside right now doesn't sound like it feels safe to a lot of people too, right? In terms of because your community's overrun. So I'm sure that increases a lot of anxiety. Make sure you stay connected to those people, to your support system. That's a huge piece, so you don't feel so alone, because surprisingly, people like, for example, always think about me like, oh, I'm centered and, meditation and mindfulness and all this stuff. I had a bad day today. I had a really bad day today. And that's why I actually found that quote for myself. And I had to, actually in the middle of the day, I had to take a nap today. I mean, I took a lunch hour, I laid down, I took a nap for an hour, because that's what I needed. I was like, I'm going to reset, see if that helps. And it actually did. It's moment to moment, it's day to day. But when you do find it being so cumulative and over multiple days, it might be, and you can't seem to get activated, that's when you might really want to reach out for some help.
Allison, you said three things that oh, sorry, go ahead, Ingrid.
No, go, Robin, go.
You said three things that I wrote down in your presentation. One was impacting us to the core, and constant recalibration, and acute to chronic. So the constant recalibration, I think that Stacy Corliss brought up in the beginning, was we've gone from, I started getting phone calls on Saturday and a lot of phone calls on Sunday about the changes that are happening. And now we are only at Wednesday. It seems almost impossible to believe. And Sheriff and I have been talking about COVID fatigue, that, especially those of us that are kind of in the center of all of this, and certainly the workers at the front lines, like, just having a little bit of time every day where you're not engaging with the COVID in some fashion, and, whatever, and giving yourself permission to like take a nap or take a walk or get away from your family for a few minutes or whatever. I think it's that we're humans. We want to know where the end point is, and we want to know what's going to happen next and what we're going to deal with. And I think that all elected officials and tourism are having to deal with, the answer is we don't know. And those, you don't run on that as a platform like, I'm the candidate that doesn't know. We don't do that, right? We like to know things, and we like to be able to help people get the answers that they need. That's part of our job as government officials. And that's part of our job as just humans, or if our kids ask us or whatever. And the answer is we don't know. And so you kind of have to create these things within your own day and your own life, amongst your friends, whereas like, I have a really dear good friend I try to talk to with regularity, and she's very involved in the news in a way that I am not, actually. And it's just like 10 minutes of our conversation needs to be about our pets, or what kind of dish soap you use, or now I'm going to bring up that there's donut pans. I did not know that. Like, that we also need to give our brains a break and kind of just do something a little bit different. And we're in a culture that really believes that if you're going to get exercise, it needs to be for an hour. Or if you're going to, do meditation, it needs to be a silent retreat for 15 days or whatever. I came from Santa Cruz, I'm kind of joking, but little bits, that we just do a little bit of something every day or every hour or whatever, that just kind of gets our brain off of the COVID and into something else, out of the stress and into something else.
Robin, along that line, and that's what I'm finding is stressing just about everybody I know out, wherever you fall on the COVID spectrum of there's no end point. We like to know what's going to happen. Like even when we have a really, really long winter and it snows and it snows and it snows, we know that summer is coming. Right? We don't know that summer is coming. We don't know when summer is coming. I mean, it's here, but we don't know when will this be over from any perspective. And that's what's stressing a lot of people out is the unknown. We don't deal with the unknown very well. Even though life really is a giant unknown, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You kind of have an idea generally what's going to happen tomorrow. This is what's kind of really freaking people out is, I don't know. When is this going to be over? I don't know. What's going to happen next? I don't know. And like you said, I didn't run on the platform of I don't know. Right. But I often answer questions like that when somebody comes to me and says, Sheriff, can I ask you a question? I'll say, yes, and I'll answer your question. But mind you, I don't know is an answer. No.
Right.
So this next question speaks to sort of, I think, what's going on this week. And it says, struggling with sudden harsh reactions from folks that have been friends or neighbors, even colleagues over a variety of interactions. People seem very reactive, feeling fragile and feeling fragile. Any tips in self-preservation?
Walk away. I had to walk away from a conversation. I'll call him a constitutional wormhole kind of a guy that has ambushed me twice now. And there's no arguing with him because his point is very clear in his head and he's not going to change his mind and I'm not going to change mine. And I said, I'm not having this conversation, and I walked away. But that's somebody I don't have to deal with on a regular basis. So dealing with a neighbor or a friend or something like that, I don't know, agree to disagree, let that topic, set it aside. I don't know. People are so spun out right now. So Robin or Allison probably have better ideas than the sheriff. Walk away.
No, maybe not. I mean, people are really reactive right now, including myself and maybe a few of the rest of us on this panel, right? Like, I mean, this is going to sound really perhaps cheesy, but one of the gifts of this to me has been interesting is I had a really bad night's sleep the other night. And I, of course, thought I was the only one because I was sleeping by myself. And then I talked to about 7 people and everybody had a bad sleep that night, right? So there's this collective experience that's happening. And I think that to answer your question maybe a little bit is if you're feeling reactive and they're feeling reactive and it's hurtful, that's what humans do when we're scared. And finding ways to talk about like, yeah, maybe just saying, this is really scary and I'm scared too. And then maybe trying to either change the subject or move on. Right now, I don't know that we're in such a heightened place. I don't know that we're going to get anywhere in some of these conversations, and maybe acknowledging that is helpful as well.
I would, from an elected official perspective, one thing I've learned that's actually served me really well in this time, as Ingrid said, sometimes we just get people coming up to us and saying, you are, and my nickname is Supervisor Pickleball, you Supervisor Pickleball, you are ruining my business. You Supervisor, you have opened this economy and you are hurting people. And that's not about me. So I had a lot of times I just have a mantra when I see the you, sometimes it's collectively you people, I just have to, in my mind, repeat a mantra. This is not about you. 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 I've done that a lot in my time in office. And the other thing I think, tip that I would give that I've given here before, I think is the idea of a loving kindness mantra. And this might be a little too woo-woo, but I'm telling you, it helps. If you can, because if somebody gets in your face and is really reactive, you want to react back, right? If you can just breathe and not do it and think 5 times, this is not about you. This is not about, even if you then have to say, I'm sorry you're upset, but I can't deal with this now. I got to walk away. I'll call you later. But you've thought it's not about you. It's not about you. So, and also, so, you know, the loving kindness meditation, again, might be a little too woo-woo for some people, but if you're feeling hurt, you can start by saying with you, for you, and you can look this up online, it's everywhere. May I live with ease. May I be happy. May I be free from pain. And then you think to the other person, may you live with ease. May you be happy. May you be free from pain. That's another one lately. I've really, when I just am ready to, maybe it's a Facebook message, just attacking, I can stop myself and do one of those two things before I respond, it really helps.
That's really good.
That's good. Yeah. I have a quick life hack about that one that's kind of like your mantra. It's based on mindfulness practice. It's just called STOP. STOP stands for S is stop, T is take a breath, O is observe, and P is proceed. So it's basically, the idea is if you feel someone coming at you or something's creating affect or emotion, or there's something that's happening that's, intense, it's a skill, right? To learn how to stop, take a breath, observe what's going on, and then proceed. And the proceed part sometimes, kind of along what you're saying, Stacy, is, if you can see the person's affect, like you can see that person's angry, right? They're angry and you don't want to engage. As soon as when you do your little stop and then take a breath, you can just say, I hear how angry you are. Just acknowledge how they feel. And you don't even have to just reflect back to them whatever that emotion is that they're throwing at you, whether it's frustration, anger, sadness. You might not get it right, but if you say, wow, it sounds like you're really frustrated, they'll correct you. They'll be like, I'm not frustrated, I'm really upset. Sorry you're so upset. This is a really difficult time right now. I think we're all feeling really upset. So like Robin was saying, like creating that, what's the commonality? How do you normalize and universalize this experience of these emotions that we're having, And sometimes that can get you out of these intense conversations. It's just to reflect what you're seeing, the emotion that the person's seeing. And it takes them down. Actually, when they feel heard, just their emotion feels heard, it can take them down just a little bit. It takes them down a notch.
I think one of the things about this is, first of all, this is going to go on for a while here. So we need to find ways to circle around our wagons around our communities and strengthen ourselves, because some of what I heard in that question is we're in a really some of us live in tiny little hamlets and small towns. Well, I mean, all of us live in a small town compared to LA, but, and that you end up having conversations with neighbors and friends and family members that you would never have in normal times. And it just brings up a lot of pain, I think, and people, we're scared right now. So we really are heightened, I think. Mm-hmm. And we need to figure out how we're going to do this as a community to get through it and take care of one another. Justin, you have another one, eh?
Yeah, there's a couple. This one we get every time, and I think we've bounced around as the panel with a lot of different ideas. So this one is, are there any suggestions and tips for how to say no to friends wanting to spend time together? I want to act responsibly, but sometimes it's hard to never see my friends and loved ones.
That one's hard.
It is hard. Saying no to friends is hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
No to people you love. No to something
hard for
you
Stephanie.
do. Yes, Stephanie, did you have something?
Yeah, so I've been I've been kind of on that boat, being pregnant and having a suppressed immune system and, feeling that anxiety all over again. And just, it's really hard. I think it's easier with family because I think family, no matter what, you're stuck with them. So I find it a lot easier having those conversations with family, but with friends, it's tough. It's tough. And I know sometimes I've just been completely honest, like, hey, I just don't feel comfortable, or maybe, hey, let's do something outside where, I know that I can maintain my distance and we can keep that distance where I feel safe doing so. But it's a really tough one, I think, with friends that even I myself have struggled with.
I've been telling people lately that I'm back in fear mode and I need to just take really good care of myself because I have to get through every day. That has helped a little bit with people who are a little more pushy in my life. just absorb it. It's, you know, it's not about you, it's about me kind of thing. I don't think there's a movie or a song about that, but yeah, and to acknowledge it's hard. And so the other thing is try to suggest, so I will say, I don't feel comfortable doing that at this time, given where we're at right now. And could we talk on the phone, or could we do a Zoom meeting, or could we, like Stephanie's saying, have some time outside?
I don't know if
But-
you guys have experienced this, but one of the things that I've gotten asked is how do you guys deal with the COVID? I think, and that's kind of like their code for like, hey, you know, do we get close? Do we not get close? So it's also gauging how we feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to start those kind of like when you have to tell somebody no, in that kind of scenario, to start with your heart and say, you know, I really miss you too. You know, I really wish I wish I felt more. I don't feel comfortable. I really wish I felt more comfortable. And it hurts that I can't see you, you know, and that we can't spend the time like we used to. So sometimes it's almost like making yourself vulnerable. Actually, that's my other little post-it. I put honesty and vulnerability are my superpowers. Because if you make yourself a little bit vulnerable, people, if you take a step towards them in that way and open up your heart a little bit, they actually soften and they open up too. So allowing yourself to be vulnerable and just say, acknowledge that, you know, it's hard for them and it's hard for yourself and you love them and you miss them and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think asking for understanding, because we all have different, we talked about this last time, different levels of comfort with, you know, what we're willing to do. You know, whether you allow somebody in your house or whether you're just going to sit on your deck or whatever. And asking for, I hope you understand, but this is my limit. And asking people to understand, and then if they're truly your friends and your family, they'll say, okay, yeah, I understand.
So I want to get to this last question because I think it's so interesting. It's a little bit of a Thursday night question, but also a little bit of a Wednesday night question, in that, you know, there is this shame around, or there seems to be this shame around this virus. And, you know, there's laws and there's HIPAA and there's rules in place about sharing information about who has it, who doesn't have it. You know, when this first started, that was the big question. Is it in North County? Is it in Mammoth? And so what can we do to really kind of reduce the shame associated with this virus so that it does become something that people are more willing to share information about? I don't have the answer. I think it's a really interesting question.
I was reading today some information about the science of the virus that they're starting to figure out. This is probably one of the most contagious, I don't know how to say this scientifically correctly, but it passes from one person to another quicker than maybe even the measles, which the measles is known as like the most contagious disease in the world, I guess. And I think to that point is any of us could have it. Like any of us right here could have it. Or all of us could get it tomorrow or next week or a month from now. Like the idea that like the unfortunate people who are coming up positive now, especially if they're sick, they're identifiable in part because we're so small and everybody's anxious about it. And it's kind of easy to figure out who it might be in your community because maybe they're talking about it, maybe they're not. But the point is anybody could have it. So if you're going to the store, if you're going to Walmart, you're walking down an aisle and you see somebody that you know there and you think, I want to talk to that person, and you move towards them and then you realize, oh, that's the lady or the man that is most recently positive. What would you do differently in Walmart? And the answer is you wouldn't do anything differently. You would wear your face covering, you would keep your distance, you would be kind, and you'd wash your hands. I mean, the point of this virus right now is you don't know. That's why it's so weird. That's why we can't figure out if we should see our own freaking family. Like, we don't know. So the people in our lives, our neighbors, friends, family members, kids on the playground, any one of us could have it, or any one of us might get it. And so as long as you're doing the precautions, that you're wearing your face covering, always, you're keeping distance from people, always, you're doing any kind of activities outside, not being indoors, all those things, I mean, those are the precautions all of us can take. and we have control over that. And that is a place of agency. But I feel for the people who are being blamed now for the ones, you know, like, because they're the ones who are positive. It could be any of us, any one of us. That's my answer.
Reading this question, one thing I thought of is, you know, I think I'm going to send a card to the person who's in the hospital if you're allowed to do that. I don't know who it is, but we've gotten that a lot. People calling and texting, which restaurant is it? Which place is it? You know, and unfortunately it's the restaurant industry, just because that's, I think this will be explained more tomorrow. That's where the majority of our economic activity has been. So it's not that restaurants weren't doing things right. It's just that's where the economic activity is, high amount of employment, and so that's where the cases came from. So you know, I go and eat and get takeout at the same restaurants I did before, and yeah, let's maybe send a card to the person who's in the hospital. Maybe we should put some signs like we did for healthcare workers out for restaurant workers, like, you're our heroes, thank you. And another thing, I just, you know, it's with the vigilance, just there was something in the question about, you know, we saw this person without a mask, and that's another thing we're getting a lot is, you know, oh, I saw this person without a mask. You know, a couple times I've gone out in the morning and walked my dog and forgotten my mask. So I just go hide in the bushes and away from people. But we also need to have some amount of grace for each other. And one of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou: "Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better." But let's have a little bit of grace and kindness. I think most of us are doing the best we can. And so if we can think of kind things to do for each other, including people who contracted this virus, let's do it.
Thank you, Supervisor Corliss. Robin, do you want to end on that note?
Sure. So I want to remind everybody that we do this every other week, every other Wednesday, Coping in the COVID World. We really appreciate all these questions this time. This is fabulous, and thank you for participating and being here. So the next one will be on August 5th at 5:30. Your illustrious panelists will be here, and then we'll probably keep to a similar format. We really appreciate all of you, again, being here and participating. Please spread the word. We're going to just keep doing this as long as it feels like it's useful and needed. Maybe we'll have a bake sale with Sheriff Braun somehow. We can give prizes or something. We can figure something out.
Have a bake off.
And I want to thank Olivia and Allison. Thank you. And Ingrid, Justin, Stacy, and Stephanie for all being here. One of the benefits of COVID for me is I have a tremendous amount of contact with people that I had a little contact with in the past, and the relationships that I have and that I'm forming and the conversations I have, even if they're through text, mean a great deal to me and keep me afloat. And so I want to thank all of you for being a part of that, because I have conversations with all of you rather regularly. And I really encourage you out there to reach out to the people that you care about and shoot them a text or send them a card or give them a donut or say hello. Something like kindness will get us through a lot of this. It will make us feel better. It'll make each other feel better. Mono County strong. That's what we need to be focused on. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Robin. And this
Thank
video
you, everybody.
to the
Thank you.
portal,
Thank you.
as well as Allison's presentation. So thank you so much, Allison, for
Awesome.
that. Put all
You're
your
welcome.
online.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone, take care.
Bye.